Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to the award-winning podcast, Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. If you like this podcast, you will love my new anthology called Moms Don't Have Time to Have Kids. Check it out, and you'll hear from 49 authors about all sorts of things moms don't have time to do. All the authors have been on this podcast. Also, check out my TikTok @with Zibby and Tracy, my other podcast, Sex Talk with Zibby and Tracy. Check out Moms Don't Have Time to Write on Medium. And of course, my new publishing company called Zibby Books. And now back to our daily author interview site and a quick hello from some of my kids. Hi.
Hi.
Hello. Enjoy the show. Nichole Perkins is the author of Sometimes I Trip on How Happy We Could Be. She's a writer from Nashville, Tennessee, who examines the intersections of pop culture, race, sex, gender, and relationships. Nichole is a 2017 Audre Lorde Fellow at the inaugural Jack Jones Literary Arts Retreat and a 2017 BuzzFeed Emerging Writers Fellow. She's also a 2016 Callaloo Creative Writing Fellow for Poetry. She hosts This Is Good For You, a podcast that highlights the pleasures of life. She formerly co-hosted Thirst Aid Kit, a podcast about pop culture and desire with Bim Adewunmi, a producer at This American Life, and was also a co-host of the Waves podcast at Slate, which looked at news and culture through a feminist lens. Her first collection of poetry, Lilith But Dark, was published by Publishing Genius in July 2018. Welcome, Nichole. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss Sometimes I Trip on How Happy We Could Be essays.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you.
Oh, yay. All right. So tell listeners about this collection. What inspired you to write all of these essays, and give us like the roundup of it?
Okay, so it is a collection of essays, kind of, as a memoir or a memoir in essays, I guess you could say. And it focuses on pop culture, me being raised as a Black girl in the South, and how all of that affected the way I see life, especially relationships and sex. So I guess that's the quick and dirty version of it. And in the book, I talk about looking at Kermit the Frog and Miss Piggy, and being a child and watching them, and then looking at them as an adult and how that changes the way you see their relationship. Looking at Niles Crane from Frasier and his, mild obsession with Daphne, and how I admired that, and I was looking for that, and then also I applied it to like my professional life, the way that he treated Daphne, or his thoughts about Daphne and their relationship. Music is such an important part of my life as well, so I talk about the music that I grew up with, and especially Prince. Prince is very, very important to me. He is one of the people I dedicated the book to. The title of the book comes from one of his songs. It's my favorite song, my official favorite song. And yeah, I guess that's kind of it.
That's awesome. So I started this publishing company a couple months ago, and one of our, top marketing execs is Janice Seeley, whose pen name is Jane Allen. Do you know Jane Allen or Janice? Anyway, her book is called Black Girls Must Die Exhausted, and she used to be Prince's assistant.
Oh my gosh, I have seen that book, Black Girls Must Die Exhausted.
Yeah.
Or what? Yeah,
I'm going to have to, after this, I want to put you two in touch, because she has all these stories about her and Prince. And as a big, huge Prince fan, I think you'll get a huge kick out of it. So
I would love that. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, she's awesome as well. Well, anyway, I thought you were so candid and open in this book, which I loved, right? Because immediately from the first moment, we're in it with you, we're growing up with you, we're under the porch, we're pushing off boys at rest time or whatever that was. And, the way you examined the movies, I mean, I'm 45. I feel like I grew up with a lot of the same pop culture. And, even as you point out, what was the role of Black teenagers? Where were they in all these John Hughes movies and all the movies and 16 Candles. 16 Candles is the frozen yogurt place I go to all the time. Anyway, and what effects that has on you to not see yourself in the films, or that the depiction of Black teenage girls was not particularly savory. So talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So I didn't really see that many Black teenage girls allowed to fall in love. We were always warned away from love on screen, and it seemed like in real life. And so it would have been nice to have those moments where, you lean over your birthday cake and get to kiss a boy, or to see that and see that Black girls are worthy of falling in love with, or, being loved and being treated, with care, or just, being willing to sacrifice something, as we see in, Pretty in Pink and all these other stories where the girl may not be the right kind of girl, or the boy might not be the right kind of boy necessarily, like on a class level, but they overcome those things in the way that you do in movies. And it would have been nice to see that, to see a Black girl, get that kind of treatment. But too often we were just kind of pushed in the background, and, we were there, but not really seen, or we were there to be the kind of person that encouraged the main character to fall in love, or, pushed the main character to, take a risk. And meanwhile, we're just kind of just there. No one's really like loving on us necessarily. You have something like Clueless, of course, that was a little different, where Dion and, she had a relationship, but she was still very much the best friend, side character, the one encouraging Cher to be bold and that kind of thing. But it was disheartening, and especially since I had started reading romance novels very early. And again, I was seeing all these, white characters fall in love. And there were Black romances as I started to get older, but they just didn't, for a long time, those Black romances just seemed to be white characters who were chocolate dipped. Basically, they just, they didn't necessarily have Black experiences, or they didn't really reference their Blackness too much, at least in the ones that I was seeing. And obviously that has changed, and that was changing as I was growing up. But it was just really difficult to find something that showed, that it's possible for Black girls to fall in a safe and easy, comfortable kind of love. And that, as someone who has always been very sensitive to romance and sex and intimacy, even as a child, it was just like it took a while for me to figure out how to approach those things in my real life. Like once I became a teenager and was starting to navigate those things, I didn't really have very good, strong examples of that, because it wasn't necessarily something we talked about in our family beyond don't get pregnant, that kind of thing. And so it would have been nice to have something to fall back on. Not necessarily a script, but just, just something like, oh, this is possible for me, and I don't have to suffer.
Not to keep referencing other books, but have you read or watched the movie A Journal for Jordan about Dana Kennedy and her husband, who actually died during military service? But it's their love story and his love of their child. And I don't know, I feel like that's like a beautiful example of a Black love story now. Like, what do you think are good examples? Like, have we come far enough? And, what have you seen that you're like, oh, phew, thank God?
Oh, so I liked the movie Sylvie's Love that came out, I think it was 2020. Time has ceased to exist.
I know.
I think it came out in 2020, and it's on Amazon. And it's kind of a historical piece. I think it takes place in like the 60s. But I thought it was a really beautiful story of Black love, because it showed them just trying to overcome their own obstacles with each other without necessarily it being a protest love story or something mired in really heavy trauma, or it's not necessarily about police brutality. It's not about trying to escape slavery. It's not trying to like get out of a dire poverty situation. And there are clear references to the fact that they are Black and that they're living in this particular world at this particular time, but that is not the end all be all of their story. It's just very much like they're just trying to like get to each other. So I thought that was very well done. Gosh, I like the show Queen Sugar a lot that comes on OWN. There are different types of love stories, romances involved in that. And, while the Bordelon family is like, they're trying to like regain their family heritage on this farm, this sugarcane farm. So, but they have a lot of different intricate stories. And I like seeing the love stories played out there. I'm trying to think of what else.
Well, if you're on writing a very beautiful, well-written, amazing Black love story. I would love to publish something like that with Zibby Books. That would be
Yeah.
amazing. Putting that, because all of everybody's feeling. It doesn't matter what you look like, where you come from. Like, love is love, romantic love for our children. Like, these are things that transcend everything. I know that sounds hokey, but it's true. We all connect over the feelings more than anything else, right? Your lived experience may be different, but deep down, like, we all know those butterflies and we all know the heartbreak. And, if we can connect on that, I think it can bridge some gaps in society. I would hope so.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we all, like you said, we all get those butterflies. We all think, we're always, is that phone call, is that text from,
right.
That special person, that kind of thing. We all have that. And I would love to see more of that. And there are definitely a lot of Black love stories, of Black romances that are out there right now. I recently read How to Marry Keanu Reeves in 90 Days.
Yes,
that was a really, that was a really fun book. And then there's like the Boyfriend Projects. Those are by K.A. Wrights. And I think that's her name. I might be confusing her social media handle.
That's all right. That's all right.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Back to your book. I'm sorry. I've gone off on this huge tangent, but now everyone has lots of recommendations. And, but I think it is important to talk about the landscape and the changing landscape, because you focus so much on that, and, what we can do to represent and do a better job and all that. I was really interested too in your own sort of sexual evolution, not to get too personal right away here, but
it's in the book. I wrote it.
But still, it's one thing to like anonymously read it, and it's another to be like, let me just talk to you about your first kiss. This whole notion of avoiding being fast, and then, those words, the, derogatory words just like increase, escalate as you age, of what you're trying to avoid being. And you grew up in a community where many of your middle school friends were getting pregnant. And I literally I read that section. I was like, no, she doesn't mean middle school. She means high school, right? And then I was like, no, she used middle school. Like, what was that like? Like, I was like embarrassed to be wearing a bra in middle school. Do you know what I mean? Like, compared to my girlfriends, but pregnancy was not in, tell me about that.
Yeah. So that was, around 6th and 7th grade, my friends started to come up pregnant, and it was scary. It was very scary because the sex education that I grew up with in, my family was just strictly don't get pregnant. And that was because there was a history of teenage pregnancy in my family. And so, my mom wanted me and my sister to avoid those same fates. And so to see these girls and to see how close it was, and not to say that it was contagious or anything like that, but I was worried because it did seem like there was a lot of pressure to show your maturity, or to show that, you were cute enough to have a boyfriend, or, like something like that. And I have always been a late bloomer. And so my friends they were very mature looking for their age, but they were clearly girls. Like, you could look at them and still tell that they were girls, that they just happened to have, curves, of a different sort than the chubby cheeks of childhood. Right. So, but it was frightening, and it led me to make this decision where I wanted to go to a different type of school and maybe be around a different type of, people, a different group of friends, in order to avoid following that same trajectory. And I remember there one friend, she was having a baby shower, and my mother wouldn't let me go. I mentioned this in the book. She wouldn't let me go because she felt like it would have been condoning the situation, that I was approving, of it, and that she was approving of it. And I remember being very upset with my mom and just being like, because it was presented like a party, right? And of course, at this point, when in those tween years, you're kind of like practicing. You want to practice for being a teenager and all that kind of stuff. And so I was like, you're making me miss out on this really great party. But my mom was very firm, and I understand, once I got older, I understood why she did that. But yeah, so if anyone is unfamiliar, being fast is what we would call young girls who were accused of being already very sexually advanced, or sexually active even, or even just, a little precocious in a very sexual way. And it was like the worst thing that you could be, because you were this temptress, you were trouble. And I didn't want to be that, but I also knew that there was something inside of me that was very fascinated by sex and intimacy and romance. And I feel like I have been trying to balance that fascination against public opinion all of my life, all of my life, even now, I'm 44, I'll be 45 later this year, and I still feel compelled to kind of like draw back so I don't frighten someone away, and have them thinking that I have just like had sex with everybody, and therefore I am a terrible person, or that I am just run through, or I don't know, just all kinds of terrible, terrible things. So I still feel compelled to kind of hide myself a little bit. And it's funny because I wrote the book and it came out and so many people were just like, oh my gosh, this is so explicit. And I had purposely toned down a lot of stuff. There were sex scenes that I cut out, and some people were just like, it's too much sex. And I was just like, oh, well, you definitely didn't want to read that first draft. So and that just made me feel like, wow, like, what can I say to make people be okay with how I am? And I had to get to a point where I have to push through that and just own my truth about who I am and what I like. And one of the reasons that I wrote the book and why I write the other pop culture and personal essays that I write about sex and relationships in movies and TV shows is because I want women, especially Black women, to be okay with expressing their desires and their sexuality across the spectrum, whether they are, it's okay to be conservative and want to wait and all that kind of stuff. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And if that is your truth, then that is your truth. And sometimes people get, teased about that, and that's okay. Sometimes people get teased about being, I don't want to say promiscuous because that's a moral judgment to call someone promiscuous, but people get teased about being, more open and more free with their love, shall we say. So there's no place you can fall on the spectrum that someone won't complain about you. There's no place you can fall on that spectrum of sexuality and desire and openness that someone won't have something to say. And I think you just kind of got to be like, F it. I am who I am, and this is me, and I'm proud of this, and this is what I want. I want someone who's going to wait until I'm ready. I want someone who's going to come home with me on the first date. Like whatever that may be, I just want all women to be comfortable with expressing that and being themselves fully in whatever it is that they desire.
I love that. That's so inspiring. I mean, nobody says we all have to be the same. And how boring would that be? Right?
Right.
Because men,
right.
Our partners are going to be all different too, right? Everybody wants a different thing. Like it would be so much harder to find the right person if we were all identical in our wants and desires and preferences. And I don't know. I think that's important. Did you know that I also host a podcast called Sex Talk with Zibby and Tracy?
Yes.
So I have gotten much more bold in talking about all sexual stuff because Tracy is like so out there, and we talk every time about like 3 anonymous questions, which really go there, Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to help in my own tiny little way of like, people are afraid to even ask the questions. People are afraid, and there's so much shame. I feel like this whole thing is shame filled, like a blanket that sort of covers this whole thing. And I feel like you're peeling it, you're pulling it back and like letting, like a nice hotel, like people are ready to jump in. You have it all like turned back, all professional or something.
Yes. And, I'm not a mom, but I know that there's still a lot of shame for women who are parents and their sexuality, and like, oh, you're a mom now, you shouldn't want this, or, you should be ready to go after whatever. And it's like, no, sometimes we're tired, or no, sometimes I want it all the time. Like, there's still this wide range, and women should be able to just express that, and mothers should be able to express their desires and what they want as well, without someone being like, no, you've got to turn all that off now. Your whole life is for your kids. And the only time you're supposed to get in the bed now is when you're trying to make another kid. It's like, excuse you. I like things that feel good too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I want everybody to be able to just like have what they want and what they need.
I love that. I feel like you need to write a romance novel.
It might be in progress. Yes. Yes.
Good. That is a perfect next step, if I do say so myself. I feel like you're going to be so good at that. And
Thank you.
that would be very fun. Well, what else do you have coming up except for, and wait, tell me about your podcast too. So you're a Slate podcaster.
Yeah, so I used to be at Slate. I had a podcast there called Thirst Aid Kit with my co-host Bim Adewunmi, who is now a producer at This American Life. And at Thirst Aid Kit, we looked at the way pop culture shaped desire. So each episode we talked about what we like to call a thirst object. So that was a celebrity who, most of us know very well. And we talk about what makes him so hot and why are we attracted to him. And it's not just about the physical stuff. I mean, we do talk about those things, but we try to talk about the things that anyone could have. So it wasn't necessarily about abs and muscles and broad backs. It was about thick eyebrows and hairy forearms and the way men wear watches sometimes, or watching him take off a tie, that kind of thing. And then the characters that they played on screen and why we fell in love with those characters and then kind of transferred that love from the characters onto the people. So that's what we would look at. And we had interviews with Chris Evans, Jason Mantzoukas, Jake Johnson, Daniel Day Kim, Blair Underwood. We talked to a lot of different people, and that's currently retired or on a little indefinite hiatus right now. I was also at The Waves for a little bit, which was kind of a roundtable discussion of news and culture through a feminist lens. And right now I am currently hosting This Is Good For You, which is a podcast through Multitude Productions. And with this podcast, I talk to people about their hobbies and the things that they do for pleasure. And because I realized at the top of the lockdown in I guess I was 2020. I just,
It's all a blur. It's all a blur.
Yeah. But I realized that all the things that I would normally do for pleasure to kind of relax and escape from this world were also things that I had monetized and were now my career. And so every time I was watching television, every time I was reading a book, I was thinking, oh, how can I turn this into an essay? How can I pitch this? Can this be a story? Whatever. And I was just like, no, I don't want to be productive in that way. I just want to do something just for me, just for the thrill of it. So I started cross-stitching again. And I realized that maybe there were other people out there who were having the same experience where they needed to get away from this, productivity hustle, feeling like every moment had to be, producing something that could be sold or monetized in some way. So I talk to people about the things that they do for the love of it. So that includes, again, needlecrafts, learning how to skateboard for the first time, learning how to play guitar, pole dancing. I just talked to someone who collects VHS tapes, those kinds of things. We've got an episode coming out about honky tonks. I just talked to a friend and they like to go to honky tonks and do all sorts of things. So I just really love it. I love talking to people about the things that they enjoy and the things that bring them pleasure, because I feel like it is a very contagious feeling, and it really does make your day to hear someone talk about something that they love and something that they can do well. I just love it. So those are the podcasts.
I love it. Amazing. Fellow woman podcaster. All about, I love it. I love podcasting. I have the best time.
I do too. I really enjoy it. I'm kind of an introverted person, so I like being behind the scenes and being able to create some of a comfortable background to talk to people without the pressure of performing so much in front of a crowd. So podcasting is perfect for me.
Yeah, me too. I'm with you. Amazing. Okay, what advice would you have for aspiring authors?
So for aspiring authors, I would tell them, one, to read a lot, read across genres, and read poetry especially. I think poetry really helps writers learn how to be concise, learn how to paint a picture with as few words as possible. I mean, I think, people think of poetry as just it has to be short and you just get in and get out. It doesn't necessarily have to be short, but because you have this, this structure of what a poem should be, you realize you have less of a framework, obviously, than a novel or a short story. So poetry just kind of helps you become a bit more illustrative with your words. So read across genres, but especially read poetry. I think that's the most important. And then also just write. Don't be afraid to write, and don't be afraid of having an ugly draft, or that everything on the page may not work and you have to start over. I do not believe in writing every day. You need a break. You need to take, the time out, refresh yourself. But I do think that writing is a muscle, and you do have to work at it, fairly regularly. Otherwise, you'll have to kind of do a lot more stretches and make sure and make sure that you get the flow back, so that you are creating something that you feel good about, and not to worry about your audience. For me, that was a problem when I was writing the book, because I kept thinking, I don't want anyone to misunderstand me. And so I would try to throw in all these different caveats and, all these different scenarios so people understood what I was saying. And my editor had to be like, why are you over explaining? Mm-hmm. Trust your audience. Trust your audience. So I think that's important to not think about your audience, but also trust your audience, and trust that they're going to go with you if you lead them properly. So yeah, that's a lot of tips. I hope that made sense.
That totally made sense. That's awesome. Great. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Nichole. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with this novel and everything else. And I'm going to connect you with Janique after this. So
that'll be awesome. I really appreciate being on. Thank you.
No problem. All right. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com, and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.